Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Happy Cynics. I'm Kevin Twain Lowry, otherwise known as Dr. K, and I'm joined by my co-host, Isaac Dillman, otherwise known as the All-Seeing Eye Dog.
Howdy, howdy.
Yeah, so did you recover from your storm outage here?
Yeah, well, a tree nearly took out my whole house, so...
Yeah, I was with, for those of you from the Midwest, remember here, they had string of tornadoes went through not too long ago, and I guess you had a small twister, or at least the remnants of one went through your neighborhood. Is that right?
Yeah, it tore up roofs and all sorts of craziness in my neighborhood, knocked a tree over in my front yard.
Yeah, how many days did it take them to get your power back on?
6.
Oh my golly,
6.
really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that long. I thought maybe 3-4 days.
So let's see, when did those twisters come through? It would have been, was it Monday or Tuesday?
When they went through?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was early in the week. Because I know I stayed.
Well, we got power back on Saturday.
It had to be before Wednesday because that's why we missed.
Because we would have recorded, yeah.
Yeah, that's why we missed a week. So, well, anyway, I'm glad to see you up and running again, and your household as well. Trust everybody else out there is safe and sound. A lot going on in the United States here these days. We're not really going to talk about this, although I was thinking of some funny stuff here. So we have Kamala Harris now evidently being dubbed to succeed Joe Biden, who's withdrawn from the race. So I was just thinking of some of the old songs. I was thinking a good campaign song, for her. I was thinking, it always pops in my head. It popped in my head right away. Comma, Kamala Harris. Cause Trump still blows. Cause Trump still blows.
That works. Yeah.
Anyway, a lot of fun stuff going on. We've reached the end of our first year. We've been doing this now for a year. And so we thought we'd just do a shorter episode here today to kind of talk about what we've learned over this past year and maybe speculate here. We're going to take 2 weeks off. So don't we, even though we're going to disappear here for a couple weeks, don't lose hope. We're not going off the air. We're just taking a short break at the end of the first season, and we're going to come running back with some new stuff and thinking of ways to build and expand what we've been doing. We've really appreciated those of you who have been faithful listeners this first year. So what do you think, Isaac? What do you think was like? We didn't really talk about this ahead of time. What would you consider one of the most enjoyable moments or episodes that we did, or which ones stand out in your mind?
Well, the series on evangelicalism, I think, was a really strong point for us.
Yeah.
Even though that was like really pretty recent.
Pretty recent, yes.
Yeah. So the other ones that come to mind would be, some of the fun ones. I really enjoyed talking about Christmas Carol, even though that was just kind of for fun.
Yes. Yeah, that was fun.
Festivals for the Dead was a really interesting one because I got to do a lot of research on cultures that I'm not necessarily familiar with. So
right.
Yeah, those are the ones that I think had a lot of intrigue.
I guess if Biden really wanted to salvage his candidacy, to run, they could have maybe said that he was a zombie or something, and it was going to be like the zombie apocalypse, and then the zombie of Biden was going to be president for the next term.
Well, have you heard the latest right-wing conspiracy that Biden actually died from his COVID?
Oh, come on. Really?
Yeah, people are, because nobody's seen him, right?
Well,
although they're supposed to see him on TV tonight.
Yeah, he's going to be on tonight, so I guess he got pointers from Paul McCartney on how to get a body double.
Yeah.
You remember that? I mean, everybody.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Everybody's like, "Oh yeah, Paul McCartney died and was replaced by a double." Yeah, okay. So anyway, yeah. So I also enjoyed the evangelical episodes. I think, and that's just because it's so close home for me, and I think that's one of the things that we kind of learned. Let me say this: when we started out, I was a little more optimistic. I'm optimistic, but I'm optimistic about a smaller percentage of the population.
Yeah.
Let me say it that way. I wanted to think when we started this a year ago that if we just broke things down for people, most people were just being duped and they just maybe didn't know any better. And once somebody was giving them some information to kind of clear the static, that, oh yeah, I see it now. And then they would start realizing how they were duped. But I'm not so sure. I think there still is a certain percentage of the population that is duped. I do believe that. But I think there's another segment of the population that this is just an opportunity for them to act on a lot of their closeted beliefs and desires. And we haven't gotten into this, but one of the things that's still on our radar, and we want to kind of maybe look for somebody to bring in to really bring some firsthand experience and some expertise into this, is the latent racism. There's a lot of homophobia that's easy to see, but there's also a lot of latent racism that there is still beneath the surface. For those of you that have enjoyed what we're doing, we not only we appreciate you, but it's folks like you that personally give me hope that, the last couple decades of my life now can still be somewhat enjoyable, that I'm not going to end up living out the rest of my life in some kind of dystopian society run by fascism and hatred.
Well, hold on. The election's in November.
Yeah, I know, but I'm at least a little more encouraged now. Now that we've seen like how much support now is coming back to push back against the Trump camp. And let me say this: I'm not speaking out against conservatism per se, because there are a lot of conservatives that don't like Trump, but they all got outed, except for the ones that just bent over and kissed Trump's ring, or whatever ring that is, but or something else. But nevertheless, people can say what they want. But you wouldn't have heard the complaints about, well, you don't. You're not going to hear the complaints about Trump like you heard on the Democrat side complaining about Biden. Is he still fit to run? We should have been told what was going on. Nobody has been outed or anything like that, like that's happened on the other side. It doesn't take a degree from Harvard to recognize this and to see it. So, you know what? It
is pretty crazy that Trump picked JD Vance as his running mate.
Yeah.
And JD Vance used to call Trump Hitler.
I know. I started calling him Shady Vance. Anyway.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
Or Shady Pants. Anyway.
Well, I used the JD Vance Hillbilly Elegy on an episode earlier.
Yeah.
I don't remember which episode it was.
Yeah, I think I remember you mentioning that. I haven't watched that. So you watched it?
Oh, I read the book. I didn't.
Read the book. Well, so what was it all about?
It's basically just a story of how he became successful after growing up in poverty.
Oh, okay.
And about his roots as like a hillbilly.
Okay.
From Kentucky.
Any
he
stories
characterizes.
About him? He took his cousin to the prom or something like that?
No, he took his mama to the prom.
Go ahead.
He characterizes the culture of Appalachia pretty poorly.
Yeah.
As just a bunch of,
Hayseeds.
rubes.
Yeah.
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 And my family's also from that part of the world.
Yes.
And I didn't care for it.
Yeah. I had the impression, I haven't seen the movie or read the book. I'll have to do that. But from what I have seen and heard, I think it was kind of a self-serving way of like, oh yeah, look how great I am because look how terrible the place was where I came from. And that just gets a little old. But yeah, the flip-flopping, good grief. Jeez. Oh my. Yeah, it's funny how these flip-flops have gone. So, when we started out here a year ago, and not that Isaac and I are trying to be rude now, but I think we're at the point where we're going to say what we think, and not to try to insult people, but there's a difference. Let's put it this way. We're not out to insult people, but we are out to criticize what we consider to be bad ideas and bad actions. I think, and it all depends. So what distinguishes, at what point do you call somebody, let's put it this way. Anybody can make a mistake and do a bad action or say something bad. Okay. But the person that's a good person that does something bad, when they learn about it, they apologize for it and they try to make amends and they change their behavior. When we call somebody, so doing one, making a mistake here or there or whatever doesn't make a person a bad person. But when people repeatedly or as a pattern say bad things, think bad things, do bad things, I think it's fair then to say, yeah, you're a bad person. That's what we mean. Jesus said, you'll know people by their fruits. In other words, like a good, clean water source doesn't give out bitter water. Bitter water comes from an impure source. And so that's the thing. We're going to call them as we see them. It's our opinion. We're going to try to involve, some more, people in the process. And I'll be honest with you, for our listeners, we're just starting out. We have a small following, so it's not easy to get somebody to take time to sit in with you and, record an episode with you when you have a small following. The bigger our following gets, the more attractive our podcast will be to getting guests. But we are going to try to get out there and find some people. They may not be the most famous, but we will try to get some folks that have some actual background and experience and expertise that we can generate some good discussion on this. And then we're looking for ways that we can translate some of these discussions onto social media. And we're building it as we go. But our goal, our plan, is to, at some point here in the near future, to establish more social media presence, and then the discussions that we start can continue on social media, and that would be another thing.
Trying to get in front of more people, because I think one of the things that we've realized is the conversation that we've been having assumes that people are sort of working from a similar set of assumptions, like very broad assumptions. And what I've seen in American politics over the last few years, and especially over the last year, is that the division is not just like whose party has better policies. It's over two different entire worlds.
Right.
People can no longer agree on what basic truths are.
Right.
And the grounds for making an argument. right?
Yes.
You just say, well, that's just not like the conversation doesn't exist anymore. And so it's kind of pointless for us on our platform to be trying to build that bridge with people who aren't listening to this.
Yeah.
But what we can do is encourage the people that are sort of on our planet to be better.
Yes. That's probably a good way to say it. Yeah, people whose sky is the same color as ours.
Yes, exactly.
So we've had a lot of fun doing the episodes, and like I say, there have been some that have been more fun than others. Like dabbling in different things, and that's another thing we are going to continue. We try to just mix it up with just some off the wall topics of interest once in a while, just so we don't want to do that too much, because we realize there's probably some of you tuning in because of the serious episodes that we do, and that level of discussion. We don't want to get, though, too focused on that and our audience get even more narrow. So our way of kind of broadening out a little bit is just by going into some other kind of side topics, like when we talk about something like aesthetics, or what were some of the other ones we did? But even that's tied. We talk about understanding the different generations and the Christian apocalypse and things like that. As you can see, we don't really have any set agenda except to inform, entertain, and actually promote our worldview. And we were kind of a little tentative about that when we started this, or at least I was. But I'm not as tentative about that anymore.
Yeah, I think we spent a significant part of the year trying to find our footing in terms of like, where do we provide entertainment?
Yeah.
Where do we provide insight, or like, where do we decipher like some of the more complex ideas that are underlying the contemporary issues? And
right.
like where, especially tentative about where do we promote like just being reasonable and what the lines are to that, and really arguing for our point of view.
Absolutely.
And I think we're going to be less tentative about all of those things going forward. We were pretty good about like, oh, here's all the background information, but we were a little hesitant about like being funny, sometimes at other people's expense. And we were a little tentative about like really saying like, people need to think a certain way.
Yeah. Being provocative.
Yeah.
I think I for one am going to be a little more provocative, but not in a hateful way, but just kind of in both a lighthearted, but let's just say a friendly challenge kind of way. That would be the thing. So, what else was I? Oh yes. So that was part of it as we were trying to get our footing. We did ramble around a little bit here and there as we kind of explored different avenues and different types of topics to see which ones had traction, which ones didn't. We're going to be a little more focused, but we still hope to continue to offer a little variety, but maybe not quite as much variety as we did this first year. But we still want to kind of keep it fun. So we would really that's another thing. We want to open up more opportunities for all of you. You have the opportunity to reach out to us through email or leaving comments. We do have a YouTube channel, but there's no video to it as of yet. But that's something that's also in our crosshairs or in our plans. And we would like to have places for you to not only interact with us, but also interact with one another. And we think that will help as well, not just have a collection of listeners, but to actually build a little bit of a community where we can kind of throw things out and discuss them and work through things. So, yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed this. Yeah, we do want to let our personalities come through a little more too. Sometimes it's, and we're not going to be like, let's put it this way. We try not to be pedantic, but we also, like I listen to other podcasts and I'll just be honest with you. Not that everything's got to be a deep discussion, but if I'm going to discuss something, I mean, I can discuss it in a lighthearted way, but I'm not really interested in discussing, like the best way to make a coconut cream pie or something like that or whatever. Not that I like coconut cream pie, don't get me wrong, but in doing something like this, I want to be able to try to offer something that you're not going to be able to get somewhere else. And that's what Isaac and I think can offer. I think our strength, and that's what we're going to try to capitalize on a little more. We have enough academic background, but also cultural, religious background in this country with a good segment of the population and we can combine those two things to, raise some interesting points and perhaps generate some interesting discussion. So,
yeah, I think one of the founding ideas of the Happy Cynics is that there are reasons to be cynical, right? About
absolutely.
People and things going on in the world, and that pushing beyond the cynicism, though, that there are also reasons to find happiness and finding joy in the exploration of the deeper side of these topics.
Yes.
Which I think if you look at the landscape of other podcasts that are sort of in our space, they make a lot of arguments, but I don't think they go very deep.
No.
Right? They're just sort of, there are more conservative propaganda podcasts than there are critical thinking and questioning yourself podcasts.
Yeah, most forums are really little more than a wading pool. Where there's not much depth to it. And some people, they want that and they enjoy that, and that's fine. Not that everything's got to be super deep where we don't want our audience struggling to keep your head above water because we're getting in so far, so quickly. But there is a reason. Let me say this. And I think this is going to be a topic of interest going into season 2. There is a reason why education does affect the way a person thinks and processes daily events. You start to see there's a difference between people that see things in a very simplistic way and people that realize there's more to what's going on beneath it than what meets the eye at the surface level. And those two groups of people are getting farther and farther apart. And that, initially I was hoping to maybe be a bridge but I don't think that's going to be for me. We're going to do our thing over here on the side of the people who realize that it's more complex, but they don't know how. They want to hear how it is more complex. And perhaps this will help you, not only in just your own personal thoughts, but even as you do your own research and learn more about these topics and influence your friends and your children, etc. Because, life is not going to get any simpler from this point going forward. We're not going to go back to, everybody, getting married at age 13 and then work the farm and, belong to the local Grange and a 4-H club or whatever. Then that's great when life was simpler and easier, but it's not going to get that way. Things are increasingly more complicated. And if we don't keep up with the learning curve, we're basically, citizens are essentially making the case for or against democracy.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of, like you were talking about, the bridge between the two worlds.
Yes.
One of the things that we're going to not necessarily make like an emphasis of the podcast, but is going to be included, is we're going to be critiquing those who we are cynical of.
Yes.
And
yes.
This is not like your everyday people who have been caught. It's the people who are doing the catching. It's people that we see as grifters, as con men, as intellectually dishonest.
Yeah, they're either intellectually dishonest, or they don't know what they're talking about, or they're just so biased that they can't see their own bigotry.
And it's people who present themselves as experts.
That's true. That's true. So I think that's fair. When somebody presents themselves, when people present themselves as experts, then I think that's fair game. Call somebody out and say, no, you're not really an expert. You're a pretender. You're a poser. And so we're going to start doing a little bit of that. So, and here's an appeal to you, the audience. If there's some podcast or some person in particular you would like us to listen to and pick apart, we would be happy to do that. So we're going to have not only some ideas of our own, but we're also going to basically burn through some of the phony baloney that's out there, and help to equip you to be an informed citizen and be able to navigate all of this. My goodness, there's so much noise out there these days. Choosing our sources wisely is probably one of the biggest pieces of advice you can give somebody today, because there is so much misinformation out there, and there's so much money to be made by just leading people around, telling them what they want to hear or what they're afraid to hear or whatever ends up titillating them in one way or the other. So, but it's been a good year with its ups and downs, and we're looking forward to kicking off season 2 here in a couple of weeks. So, anything we also need to tie in here, do you think, Isaac? I think we're pretty much.
Well, you opened with asking me what my favorite highlights were from the year. So what were your favorite highlights from the year?
Oh, well, I did say I enjoyed the evangelical episodes. I will say also, looking at the different generations was also a bit nostalgic for me as an older middle-aged person. I'm not quite there. I don't get the senior citizen discount everywhere yet. So, I'm right there. Some places they'll let you in when you get to be 55 and you get the senior citizen discount. My wife Amy would always get a kick out of it, because at one of the local Taco Bells a few years back, there was a kid that worked in there that would always give me a senior citizen discount without even asking my age. And my wife, of course, thought that was hilarious, because they think you're, but now whenever she's offered it, it's not quite as funny. But I enjoyed that. I also, it I don't think got as much attention or attraction, but some of the things we did with like cultural shifts, and I really enjoyed talking about the etiquette. The etiquette episode was a good topic for me, or at least I find that interesting, because I'm still kind of divided on that. We have this, and I was doing some reading here not too long ago, even because of the political tensions and things that have made things so much worse. There are a number of therapists, there's even a growing polarity, even amongst mental health therapists, as to giving advice to younger adults, especially, whether they should try to learn to tolerate the differences between them and their families, or whether to separate themselves from their families altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And so that intersects, and maybe that's something that, we could maybe look into or have somebody talk about at some point. But making that decision on, when do you just distance yourself and drop all communication with somebody versus when do you, try to keep the lines open, and how do you establish boundaries without severing the relationship altogether? Those are not easy things. And the fact is, a lot of that stuff just happened because there was all this expectation that this is traditionally what everybody's expected to do, so you just do it. And that's what people did. But now that we're at the point where people don't care whether it's traditional or not, there don't seem to be any inherent duties or expectations placed on anybody. And so that can open up a brand new ball game, especially when you talk about families. You have your child grow up, become an adult, and then decide that they don't get along with you enough and just decide to separate themselves from you and not have any more contact with you. And
that certainly seems to be a phenomenon that's on the rise.
Yes.
So, and it's a generational thing we could talk about.
It is.
Because it's mostly my generation burning that bridge.
Yes. Yeah. And that's kind of why that etiquette episode was an interesting one to me, because it is, I think, that the underlying thing about what kind of obligations do we have to other people, especially those that raised us and we grew up around and things like that. There certainly has to be some kind of a happy medium there.
The tension is between that, like your duties to your parents, and like if you're LGBTQ, and you're married,
right,
your duties to your spouse.
Oh yeah, because I read about people telling stories where, they were LGBTQ and they end up marrying somebody same gender, but then the family, like this person's family, would not even allow the spouse to even be mentioned, as though the spouse didn't even exist. And eventually this person just basically had to cut off all contact with his or her family. I can't remember.
You're asking people to choose between their family and their spouse.
Yeah.
This is something that, like, our generation feels like, well, what do you expect them to pick?
Well, okay, so so even like something like this, that's on one side of it, but on the other side is, I'm thinking, really, is somebody's sexual orientation really that offensive that you would rather risk losing your child than learning to tolerate your child's differences, even if you don't agree with them? And I don't understand the mentality on the other side from some of these parents. I think and that's something that that's another topic, but those are kind of things. I think there's a lot of depth to some of these topics that I think will really hit home to people. So even when we're talking about not only like obligations and duties and expectations and things like this, but even like on the other side, a sense of entitlement. That's the other thing. So if people have default duties like to family, well, then the family members feel entitled. It's like, well, I'm your mother. You realize how long I was in labor with you or whatever. And so because of that, now that entitles you to absolute loyalty and obedience, regardless of what you do. That's just a bunch of nonsense. And so there's that side of it too. And so anytime a social structure changes, it changes the dynamics on both sides of the relationship. And so you not only have younger people deciding, how do I establish boundaries with my family, but these families need to learn that, hey, you're not entitled to something. if you're not going to maintain a good relationship. So these are some things that we could maybe delve
previews
into
for season 2.
Yeah. So we already have some ideas of some things we'd like to talk about. But nevertheless, I still, I think battling back some of the BS that's out there is a good way, a good thing for us to add to our repertoire. Cause that's an important thing. So we plan to be a little more aggressive in calling out some of the nonsense that's out there. And I think a lot of you and some other people might find that interesting. So, we'll, do some intellectual shish kebabbing and, see how many bad thinkers we can get on one skewer.
They're going to start calling us Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah. Well, they did have, I thought did they call it that? Vlad the Impaler, on, what is it? A robot, BattleBots. Did you ever watch BattleBots?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there was a BattleBot named Vlad the Impaler a few years ago. I've been watching that now for several years. It's pretty fun to watch.
This might be the nerdiest thing we have in common.
Yeah, probably so. But that's pretty interesting. But so we're going to do some intellectual battle botting. So anyway, that would be good. Well,
maybe that's how we should solve our cultural issues, is whichever party comes up with the best battle bot.
Oh, that's a good idea, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, well, it's funny because it's like with BattleBots, it's interesting. Even that could be an episode in and of itself. It's just even the way people think and strategize. So there's a difference between the people that put together these BattleBots that are very simple. There was one called Tombstone, where this guy just basically had a big horizontal bar spinner on top of it. It was just nothing but a box with a heavy bar on top just spinning. And for a couple years, he was that was the most difficult bot to defeat. And he won the competition a couple years. Well, then other people started developing other with little wedges in the front to get underneath of it and then flip it and stuff like that. It's interesting how some of these people start out trying to have a battle bot that has 3 or 4 different types of weapons, but then none of them work really that well. So it's it's different. It's
put
interesting.
A wedge on the front.
Right. It's interesting to watch the people that try to just keep the design simple and do one thing well versus, no, we got to have a multifaceted attack. So you got one spinner on the front, one spinner on the back, and then a flamethrower in the middle and all this other kind of stuff. But sometimes those are the ones that don't last.
I don't talk about this a lot, but when I was in high school, I did Science Olympiad for 1 year.
Oh, yeah?
And I took the varsity trophy for maglev car.
Wow.
Because all the designs were crazy complicated. And all I did was stick a propeller on a piece of wood and put the magnets on top of the wood instead of underneath the wood and took the varsity trophy.
Wow.
Wow, that was not hard.
In my early days,
keep it simple.
In my early days, I actually was a science fair judge a couple years ago for a couple years when I was an engineer. Anyway.
Maybe we do a physics or engineering spin-off episode.
Oh,
just for fun.
Yeah, that would be all right. So I guess
burn a fun one.
Some people, maybe we're already doing social engineering, but we could talk about some other stuff. I mean,
well, and if we really want to tie it back in, we can talk about how there's not that much difference between technology and social technology.
Yeah. Well, I think some kind of technology issues would be good to keep up on. So advances in medicine, checking up what's going on in some of these areas and even talk about, we did one AI episode. It'd be nice to maybe do an update on AI at some point. Keep everybody abreast on certain things like that. And so there might be a few topics here where we do some investigative research and see what we can find out, and then bring that back to our audience. So, all right. Well, it's been a good year. We're going to enjoy our 2 weeks off. We hope you do too. And we thank you for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. Take care, and if the world doesn't end before, we'll be back to start with season 2. Take care. God bless.